The thing nobody tells you about disliking someone at work is how much energy it takes. Not the dramatic kind of dislike. Not the kind where there are incidents, where HR gets involved, where you complain to your friends and they top up your wine. The other kind. The low-grade, persistent, professional kind, where you see a name in your calendar and something in you just tightens. Where you learn the specific rhythm of someone's footsteps in the hallway, so you can decide in half a second whether you need to look busy. I was very good at looking busy. Ryan Calloway was the person whose footsteps I'd learned. 2 years, 7 shared projects. The particular dynamic of two people who are professionally necessary to each other and personally incompatible in ways that are hard to articulate. He designed things that shouldn't have been possible on the budgets we had. I managed the budgets. You can see where this is going. The frustrating part, the part I didn't admit to myself for a long time, was that the things he designed were genuinely extraordinary. I knew this. I walked those buildings and I understood, in the part of me that studied architecture for 2 years before I switched to project management, exactly what he'd achieved. The light in the Delancey atrium, the way the Werner building sat in its landscape like it had always been there. I understood it. I never said so. Because we were adversaries, and you don't give adversaries the thing they actually want. You give them the correction on the timeline. You send the email about the cost overrun. You keep the record so that when the project slips, and it usually slipped, you can point to the moment when you said so. I had a folder. I had named it, with a pettiness I'm not proud of, documented. There was a lot of documentation. The project was a residential complex in Vermont. Beautiful site, difficult client, timeline that I described in the first meeting as aggressive and Ryan described as manageable. The timeline had, so far, been holding. This was the part that was hardest to live with. The site visit in December was supposed to be routine. 2 days, walk the site, meet the client, confirm the Q1 schedule, fly home Sunday. Thursday night, the snow started. I looked at the weather app under the table at dinner, and the forecast was alarming. I showed it to Ryan and he looked at it with the expression of someone who had spent a year being right about timelines and was now watching weather happen. 36 hours minimum, I said. I can see that. Flights are already canceling. I can see that too. We looked at each other across the table with 2 years of documented professional antagonism between us and the specific bleakness of two people who are going to be stuck somewhere together and both know it. Well, he said. Yes, I said. We drove the junior team members back to the hotel before the roads got worse. We walked back in the snow, which was coming down heavily enough that conversation wasn't practical, and that was fine with both of us. Saturday. I worked from my room until noon, then until 2, then until I had finished everything I could finish and was sitting at the small desk staring at a completed to-do list. I went downstairs at 3. The hotel bar was a small room off the lobby, wood paneling, a fireplace doing real work, a bartender named Dale who had the settled quality of someone who had been snowed in before and found it basically fine. Ryan was at a table by the fire. He was not working, he was not reading, he was just sitting there, looking at the fire, with an expression I had never seen on his face in 2 years of project meetings. Something private, something that had been there before I came downstairs. I almost turned around. I didn't because that would have required walking back through the lobby, and he would have heard me leave, and we both would have known what it meant. Morgan. Calloway. I took the table across from his. 1 table of separation. Dale appeared. I ordered wine. We sat. The fire. The snow against the windows. Your parents, I said, after a while. I'd heard his voice through the wall that morning. Not the words, just the tone of it. He looked at me. 41 years, he said. I didn't say anything. They're being very adult about it, apparently. My mother called specifically to tell me that. He turned his glass. As if that's the main thing. Isn't it? I don't know. A pause. I keep trying to figure out what 41 years means if it ends. Whether the ending changes what the middle was. I don't think it does. He looked at me, slightly surprised, like he hadn't expected me to engage. No? You're the same people who had those years. The ending doesn't undo them, it just changes what you thought they were pointed at. He was quiet for a moment. That's actually useful. I have them occasionally. Useful thoughts? Don't push it. He almost smiled. Not quite. We sat. Why didn't you ever say anything? Ryan said. I looked at him. About? The work. A pause. Delancey, the Werner building. You walked those sites. I saw you. I held very still. I don't know what you're talking about. The atrium at Delancey. You stood there for 30 seconds. I was watching. You stopped and looked up, and I was checking the structural clearances. You weren't. Calloway. The light, he said. You were looking at the light. Silence. The fire shifted. A log resettled. You spent 3 weeks on that angle, I said quietly. You knew that? It's in the project documentation. He was staring at me. You never said anything, he said. You never asked. Why would I? Because we were adversaries. I looked at my wine. You don't tell adversaries what they got exactly right. It's not a useful position to be in. He was quiet for a long time. I thought you hated the design side, he said finally. I thought the work itself didn't matter to you, only the management of it. I studied architecture, the expression on his face. 2 years, then I switched. Why? Because I was going to be a mediocre architect and an excellent project manager, and those are different lives. I chose the one where I'd be excellent. He looked at me differently then, something in the quality of his attention. I've been wrong about you, he said. I know. That's not, no, I mean, I know what you thought. You thought the timeline concerns were defensive, that I was covering myself rather than trying to prevent things from going wrong. How did you? Because if I were you, watching me, that's what I'd think. He was quiet. Were you, he said, covering yourself? I thought about it honestly. Partly, I said. In the beginning, the documentation was partly defensive, but the Harrington timeline, the Werner material leads, those weren't defensive. I was right, and I was trying to prevent something bad for the project. I know. Do you? I've known for a while. He looked at the fire. I just didn't. It was easier to think of you as the person who was slowing things down, because if I thought of you as the person who was right, I'd have to think about what I was doing. That's not unfair. No. We sat with that. I've been wrong about you too, I said. He looked up. You care so much about what you make that everything else becomes secondary to it. I thought that was arrogance. It's not arrogance. It's a different weight on the scale. You have one weight, and it's always the thing itself, the design, the building, what it'll be when it's standing. Everything else is logistics to you, which is your job, which is my job, and which matters. But we've been measuring with different instruments, and neither of us knew it. I think we both kind of knew it. We just didn't say it. He looked at me. Why are you saying it now? Because we're snowed in, and there's nothing else to do. And because I've been carrying a folder called Documented for 2 years, and it's become a bad habit. He was quiet. What's in it? Every time I was right about a timeline. How many? You don't want to know. Morgan. 17. He closed his eyes briefly. 14 of those probably weren't your fault. The conditions were 14, approximately. What are the other 3? The Werner loading dock, the Delancey mechanical rough end, and the Vermont window installation, which hasn't happened yet, but is going to slip by approximately 8 days starting the second week of January. He was staring at me. How do you know about January? I talked to the fabricator 3 weeks ago. His supply chain has a 6-week backup on the custom glazing. Nobody asked him the right question. Why didn't you? I sent you an email on November 19th. Silence. Which I didn't open, I know. I checked the read receipt. I sent a follow-up on the 26th. Morgan, there will be a conversation about this, I said, but not tonight. Tonight I'm just telling you because you asked. He looked at me for a long moment. I'm going to open my emails more carefully, he said. That would be good. Dale appeared again. He made a quiet judgment call and went back to his station without asking if we needed anything. We talked for another 3 hours. I don't remember all of it. I remember the quality of it, the particular ease that comes when the thing you've been managing around is finally on the table, and you don't have to manage around it anymore. Sunday morning. I came downstairs at 8 for coffee, and the dining room was mostly empty, and Ryan was at a corner table with his laptop open, which he wasn't looking at. He had a coffee, and there was a sketch on a napkin in front of him. Quick lines, the kind designers make when they're thinking, rather than when they're presenting. I sat across from him. Morning. Morning. He pushed the coffee pot toward me. I poured my own cup. We sat for a while. He went back to the sketch. The entry sequence, he said finally, not explaining, just naming it. I looked at the sketch. He was right. I'd walked that entry on Thursday and felt it without naming it. The way the space gave you nothing to do while you were approaching. No gradual shift, just a wall and then a door. The grade drops too fast before the entrance, I said. He looked at me. Say more. About a meter over 6 meters. That's steep enough that you're watching your feet the whole approach instead of transitioning into the building. If you added a lower retaining element on the approach side, it would let you push the grade change earlier. More room to do the work in the paving instead of the topography. He picked up his pen, drew something, pushed the napkin toward me. I looked at it. That works, I said. It adds to the landscape budget. Not significantly. The material cost is modest. Same labor whether it's 1 retaining course or 2. He looked at me. How do you know the material cost? I reviewed your procurement schedule in October. I picked up my coffee. I know what suppliers you're using and what their current quotes look like. He stared at me. You reviewed my procurement schedule. I review all procurement schedules. That's my job. And you remembered the approximate costs for... I have a good memory for numbers. He looked at the sketch, then at me, then back at the sketch. I've wasted 2 years, he said. Not to me, to himself. We both have. I wasted more. Probably. He didn't say anything else. Drew another line on the napkin, erased it, drew a different one. The dining room filled up slowly. Hotel Sunday morning sounds. The snow still coming down outside, lighter now. We stayed at the corner table for 2 hours, talked about the Vermont entry sequence, about the Werner building, about a project from 18 months ago that had been difficult, and what each of us had been thinking during the difficult parts, which were different things, which would have been useful to know at the time. At some point I realized I was having the same conversation as the night before, but without the wine and the firelight, and the specific permissions that late evenings give you. And it was the same conversation. We were the same people in daylight as we'd been in the dark. That was, in its way, more significant than anything we'd said the night before. We should talk to the client about the entry sequence, Ryan said. I'll draft the scope change. We could do it together. I looked at him. Okay, we could do it together. He nodded, closed his laptop. We went to find the client. Monday was strange. I was wrong about that, but it was a useful strange. The kind where you've stopped pretending something isn't there, and the thing itself becomes available to work with instead of just taking up space. We still disagreed in meetings. We still had projects where he did things that were going to cause problems, and I said so, and he didn't agree. That part didn't change, but the disagreements were different. 2 people working toward the same thing from different instruments, rather than 2 people defending positions, which is a small difference that makes everything larger. 4 months after Vermont, I found a note on my desk after a site update. Not a coffee, a note, handwritten. It said, January window schedule. You were right. 9 days, not 8. Well done. I looked at the note for a while, wrote on the back, You're welcome. Still putting it in the folder. Left it on his desk. He emailed at 5:15. Fair. That was it. That was the whole thing. Which isn't a love story, exactly, not the way those usually get told. But it was the beginning of something I hadn't expected to find in a hotel bar during a snowstorm with a man I'd been documenting for 2 years. Something that felt actual, which, I've learned, is where most of the real things start.